There are seasons in life where it feels like nothing is changing. You've been believing, praying, standing in faith, but the breakthrough hasn't come. The situation hasn't turned around. The dream hasn't come to pass. It's easy to get discouraged, to think it's never going to happen. But what you can't see is that behind the scenes, things are shifting. The right people, the right opportunities, the right breaks, they're already lining up. You may not see it yet, but your season of blessings is coming. Just because it's delayed doesn't mean it's denied. Sometimes God takes longer than we expected, not because He's forgotten about us, but because He's preparing something greater than what we asked for. What He has in store is bigger, more fulfilling, more rewarding than anything you've imagined. If you could see what's coming, you wouldn't stress over what's not happening. You wouldn't live worried about how it's going to work out. You would rest in the fact that the promise has already been set in motion. Don't let the waiting season cause you to give up on what you know is meant for you. You've come too far to stop now. Every day you stay in faith, you're getting closer. Every time you choose to believe instead of complain, you're moving toward it. It may not look like anything is changing, but in the unseen realm, things are shifting in your favor. The healing is on the way. The right person is coming. The promotion, the restoration, the breakthrough, it's already scheduled. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Too often people get discouraged when they don't see immediate results. They pray, they believe, they do their best, but when nothing changes, they start to wonder if it's ever going to happen. They assume that the delay is a sign that it's not meant to be. But what we have to understand is that a delay is not a denial. Just because it hasn't happened on our timetable doesn't mean God has said no. There are things in life that take time to develop. Some dreams, some breakthroughs, some blessings require preparation, both in us and in the situation itself. If it hasn't happened yet, it may be because God is still aligning the details. He's making sure the right people are in place, the right doors are ready to open, and the right conditions have been set. We don't always see the bigger picture, but God does. What may feel like a delay to us is actually divine timing at work. Sometimes the delay is about our growth. We may think we're ready for the blessing, but there are lessons to learn, character to develop, faith to strengthen. If we were to receive what we're asking for too soon, we might not be able to handle it properly. We might not appreciate it the way we should. The delay isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's an opportunity to grow, to become stronger, to build the faith and endurance necessary to step into what's coming. Other times, the delay is about protecting us. We might be asking for something that, if given to us right now, wouldn't be a blessing but a burden. Maybe we're praying for a new job, but God knows that the position we're asking for would bring unnecessary stress, or it would take us away from something better He has planned. Maybe we're asking for a relationship, but God is keeping us from heartbreak, waiting until the right person comes along. What looks like a delay is actually divine protection. There are moments when it feels like God is silent, like nothing is happening, like prayers are going unanswered. But silence doesn't mean absence. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. A seed planted in the ground doesn't immediately break through the soil, but that doesn't mean it's not growing. Underneath, in the unseen, roots are forming, strength is building, and in the right season, it will break through. Your dream, your breakthrough, your promise is growing beneath the surface. The enemy will try to convince you that because it hasn't happened yet, it's never going to happen. He'll whisper doubts, plant fear, and make you question whether you heard God correctly. He wants you to give up before you see the promise come to pass. But just because it's not happening as fast as you thought doesn't mean it's not on the way. The enemy knows that if you stay in faith, if you keep believing despite what you see, you'll step into what God has for you. It's easy to get impatient, to try and force things to happen on our own. But when we try to take matters into our own hands, we often settle for something less than what God had planned. We move too soon and we miss the fullness of the blessing. When we trust God's timing, we allow Him to bring the best into our lives. What He has planned is always worth the wait. A delay is never a sign that God has forgotten about you. It's not proof that your prayers aren't working. It's a sign that something greater is being prepared. It's a reminder that timing matters, that preparation is key, and that faith is built in the waiting. What you can't see is that behind the scenes, God is working in your favor. While it may look like nothing is happening, things are shifting in the unseen realm. People are being positioned, doors are being prepared, the right circumstances are coming together. Just because you don't see immediate evidence doesn't mean God isn't moving. The natural world is limited, but God operates in the supernatural. He is orchestrating events, making connections, and arranging moments that will lead you to the breakthrough you've been believing for. Sometimes we get discouraged because we don't see progress. We assume that if something were really happening, we would notice it, but faith is trusting that even when there's no visible sign, God is still at work. Think about a seed planted in the ground. It doesn't sprout overnight. For a time, it seems like nothing is happening, but beneath the soil, roots are growing, the structure is forming, and the foundation is being laid. In due time, that seed will break through and become what it was always meant to be. The same is true in your life. Just because you don't see the growth yet doesn't mean it's not taking place. God works in ways we don't always understand. He doesn't always move in obvious, predictable ways. What you thought would be the solution may not be how He chooses to answer. You might have expected a certain person to help you, a certain job to open up, a certain door to be the one that leads you forward. But when it doesn't happen the way you expected, don't assume God isn't moving. He may be preparing something even greater, something you never saw coming. His ways are higher than our ways, and His timing is always perfect. There are moments when it feels like prayers are going unanswered. You've been believing, standing in faith, but nothing has changed. It's tempting to think God has forgotten about you or that He's not listening. But He hears every prayer. He sees every tear. He knows the desires of your heart. What you don't realize is that while you've been praying, He's been putting things in place. What looks like a delay to you is actually divine alignment. The right people need to be in the right place. The right conditions need to be set. God is not just preparing the blessing for you, He's preparing you for the blessing. Sometimes God holds things back because He knows we're not ready yet. We may think we are, but He sees what we can't see. There are skills to develop, maturity to gain, and experiences to go through that will equip us for what's ahead. If He were to give us everything we ask for right now, we might not be able to handle it. The waiting season isn't wasted time. It's a time of preparation, a time of strengthening, a time of learning to trust Him fully. Other times, God is protecting us from something we can't see. We may be asking for an opportunity, but He knows that taking it right now would bring unnecessary struggle. We may be pushing for a certain relationship, but He knows it wouldn't be the right fit. What looks like rejection is actually divine protection. When God closes a door, it's not to keep you from something good, it's to keep you for something better. If you knew what was happening behind the scenes, you wouldn't worry. You wouldn't stress about the timing. You wouldn't doubt whether it's going to happen. You would rest in the fact that everything is already being arranged in your favor. The details are coming together. The people are being positioned. The resources are being lined up. The connections are being made. In the unseen realm, the breakthrough is already in motion. What you're going through right now is not permanent. The difficulties, the challenges, the obstacles, they are temporary. It may feel like you're stuck, like nothing is changing, like you've been in the same place for too long. But just because it's been that way for a season doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever. Every storm eventually runs out of rain. Every night eventually turns into morning. The situation that looks unmovable, the problem that seems impossible, the struggle that feels overwhelming, it has an expiration date. It's easy to believe that because you've been facing the same battle for a long time, it's never going to change. Thoughts will try to convince you that it's always going to be this way. The enemy will whisper that the struggle is permanent, that the door will never open, that the dream will never come to pass. But what you're experiencing right now is just a chapter in your story. It's not the whole book. If you stop in the middle, you'll never see how things turn around. If you give up now, you'll miss the victory that's already set in motion. God never allows a difficulty unless there's a purpose behind it. Every challenge, every delay, every disappointment is working for your good. You may not see it in the moment, but one day you'll look back and realize that what seemed like a setback was actually setting you up for something greater. The struggle is not there to defeat you, it's there to prepare you. The pressure you feel is not meant to break you, it's meant to strengthen you. Sometimes we go through seasons where nothing makes sense. The doors close, the opportunities dry up, the people we counted on walk away. In those moments, it's tempting to feel forgotten, to think that maybe this is just the way life is always going to be. But those seasons are not the end of your story. They are chapters that build faith, endurance, and perseverance. Without them, you wouldn't be prepared for the blessings ahead. What feels like a setback today is actually a setup for something greater. There are things you're learning in the struggle that you wouldn't learn any other way. You're developing strength that's going to carry you in the next season. You're gaining wisdom that will allow you to handle the blessings when they come. If you never had to fight, you wouldn't appreciate the victory. If you never had to believe in the unseen, you wouldn't know how to trust in the promises. The process may be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. God knows the exact moment when things will shift. You may feel like you've been in the valley too long, but He has already set the time for your breakthrough. He has already determined when the situation will turn in your favor. If you could see what He has planned, you wouldn't be discouraged by what you're facing. You would know that this is only temporary. Everything can change in an instant. What looks impossible today can be turned around tomorrow. The struggle you've been dealing with for years can suddenly shift. The battle you've been fighting can suddenly be won. That's why you can't let the present situation define your future. You have to remind yourself that this is not permanent. The sickness, the financial difficulty, the uncertainty, it's all subject to change. God has already written the final chapter. What He started in your life, He will finish. The delays, the obstacles, the opposition, they are all temporary. When the time is right, when the season shifts, everything will fall into place. The struggle is not your destiny. The hardship is not where your story ends. It's just a season, and seasons always change. Faith in the waiting is what brings the blessing. It's easy to trust when everything is going our way, when the doors are opening, when the opportunities are falling into place. But the real test of faith comes when nothing seems to be changing, when the situation looks the same, when we've been believing for a long time and still haven't seen the promise come to pass. That's when it's tempting to get discouraged, to let doubt creep in, to start thinking maybe it's not meant to be. But faith is believing even when there's no sign of progress. Faith is trusting that God is working even when nothing around us looks different. Every moment we stay in faith, we're getting closer to the promise. Every time we choose to believe instead of complain, every time we keep praising instead of giving up, we are moving toward the breakthrough. It may not be visible yet, but things are shifting behind the scenes. The right people, the right opportunities, the right connections are all lining up. Just because we can't see the progress doesn't mean it's not happening. In fact, some of the greatest breakthroughs come right after the longest seasons of waiting. There are times when God allows us to go through waiting seasons because He is preparing us for what's ahead. If He gave us the blessing too soon, we might not be able to handle it. The waiting is not a punishment, it's preparation. It's in the waiting that our faith is stretched, our character is developed, our strength is built. The lessons we learn in the waiting are what sustain us when the blessing arrives. Without the waiting, we wouldn't be ready for the fullness of what God has in store. It's easy to get frustrated when we don't see results, to wonder if our faith is making any difference. But faith is not about immediate results. It's about trusting in the process. When a farmer plants a seed, he doesn't expect to see a harvest the next day. He understands that growth takes time, that roots have to go deep before the plant breaks through the soil. The same is true with our prayers, our dreams, our breakthroughs. Just because we don't see it yet doesn't mean it's not growing. The enemy will try to convince us that our waiting is in vain, that nothing is ever going to change, that we might as well give up. But that's exactly when we need to stand firm. The moments when doubt feels the strongest are often the moments right before the breakthrough. If we give up too soon, we may miss what God has already set in motion. What if the answer is just around the corner? What if the promise is about to be fulfilled? What if all we have to do is hold on a little longer? The way we handle the waiting determines how we step into the blessing. If we complain and grow bitter, we'll miss the lessons God is trying to teach us. But if we keep trusting, if we keep believing, if we keep speaking faith, we position ourselves to receive what has already been promised. The waiting season is not wasted time. It's a time of refining, of strengthening, of preparing. Faith in the waiting means choosing to believe even when nothing seems to be happening. It means declaring victory even when everything says defeat. It means keeping our eyes on the promise instead of the problem. The timing is already set. The doors are already planned. The right connections, the right opportunities, the right moments, they are all coming together. It's not a question of if, but when. And when the time is right, nothing will be able to stop what God has prepared. What's coming is bigger than expected. Sometimes we limit our thinking based on what we see, what we've experienced, or what others tell us is possible. We pray for just enough to get by, for a small opportunity, for a little breakthrough, when God has something much greater in store. The plans He has for us go beyond what we can imagine. He's not thinking small. He's the God of abundance, the God of overflow, the God who does exceedingly, abundantly above all we can ask or think. It's easy to get discouraged when things don't happen the way we expect. We pray, we believe, we wait, but when nothing changes, we start to shrink our expectations. We settle for less, thinking maybe this is all there is. But just because it hasn't happened yet, if it happened too soon, it wouldn't be the right time. If it was given too easily, you might not be ready for it. God is setting things up in your favor. He's not just bringing you an opportunity, He's bringing you the right opportunity. He's not just opening a door, He's opening a door that no one can shut. When He blesses you, it's not going to be ordinary, it's going to be extraordinary. It's going to be more fulfilling, more rewarding, more impactful than you ever imagined. You may have a picture in your mind of how you think it's going to happen, but God's ways are higher than our ways. His plan is greater than anything we could come up with on our own. There are moments in life when we think we've reached our limit. We look at our circumstances and assume this is as good as it gets. We believe for improvement, but we don't expect anything beyond that. The problem with limited thinking is that it can keep us from receiving the fullness of what God wants to give us. If we're only looking for small blessings, we might miss the bigger things He is trying to do. When we expand our faith, when we raise our expectations, when we dare to believe for more, we position ourselves to receive more. God is not just going to meet your needs, He's going to exceed them. He's not just going to restore what was lost, He's going to bring you back better than before. He's not just going to bring the right people into your life. He's going to bring divine connections that will take you further than you ever dreamed. The right doors are going to open at the right time in a way that leaves no doubt it was His hand at work. The blessing that's coming is going to make up for the years of struggle. The breakthrough that's ahead is going to be bigger than anything that's come against you. The increase that's on its way is going to be greater than the setbacks you've endured. The season of difficulty is not how your story ends. What's coming is beyond what you prayed for, beyond what you hoped for, beyond what you thought was possible. Sometimes what looks like a disappointment is really a setup for something better. The job that didn't work out, the opportunity that fell through, the relationship that ended, it may have felt like a loss, but God has something greater in store. When He closes one door, it's because He's about to open a better one. When things don't go as planned, it's because His plan is bigger than yours. The right opportunity, the right person, the right moment, it's all coming. And when it does, you'll see why it had to happen this way. Your past does not define your future. Too often, people allow their history to shape their destiny. They let past mistakes, failures, disappointments, and setbacks convince them that they have reached their limit. They replay the regrets, the missed opportunities, the bad decisions, and assume that because they made mistakes, they are disqualified from receiving what God has for them. But just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it has to control what happens next. Where you've been does not determine where you're going. The mistakes you've made do not cancel out the destiny that's still ahead. God is not focused on what you've done wrong. He's focused on what He can still do through you. He doesn't see you through the lens of your failures. He sees you through the lens of your potential. He knows every mistake, every setback, every bad decision, and yet He still has a plan for your life. Nothing you've done has changed His calling. Nothing you've been through has altered His promise. The enemy wants you to believe that your best days are behind you, that you've missed your chance, that you've gone too far. But God is a God of redemption, a God of new beginnings, a God who turns mistakes into miracles. Some of the greatest stories in history are about people who refused to let their past dictate their future. People who failed, who fell, who made mistakes but didn't stay down. They got back up. They kept believing. They stepped into a new season. Your past is not your identity. You are not what happened to you. You are not the bad choices, the failures, or the disappointments. You are who God says you are. Chosen, redeemed, restored, and filled with purpose. The enemy will always remind you of what you've done wrong. He will bring up the past, try to make you feel unworthy, try to convince you that you don't deserve a fresh start. But that's because he knows that if you ever realize who you really are, if you ever step into the fullness of what God has planned, you will be unstoppable. That's why he works overtime to keep you stuck in guilt, shame, and regret. He knows that if you stay focused on what's behind you, you won't step into what's ahead of you. God's grace is greater than your past. His mercy is bigger than your mistakes. He can take the very thing the enemy meant for harm and turn it around for good. The situation that looked like a setback, the failure that seemed final, the mistake that you thought would define you, God can use it all to bring about something even greater. Nothing is wasted in His hands. He knows how to bring beauty from ashes, how to turn pain into purpose, how to take the worst moments and use them as stepping stones to your destiny. It's time to stop looking back. It's time to stop rehearsing what went wrong. Stop dwelling on who hurt you. Stop living in regret over what didn't work out. The past is over. You can't change it, but you can decide that it will not control you anymore. You can choose to move forward, to believe again. God still has something great ahead for you. The blessing, the opportunity, the breakthrough, the dream, it's still in motion. Nothing you've done has canceled His plan. You may have taken some detours. You may have gone through some tough seasons, but you are not off course. The road to your destiny still exists. The path to your purpose is still open. What's ahead is greater than what's behind. The future is calling, and it's time to step into it. The waiting, the struggles, the disappointments, they were never meant to stop you. They were meant to prepare you. Every challenge, every delay, every closed door was setting you up for something greater. What seemed like a setback was actually a setup for the blessings that are about to unfold. Your past does not define you. Your mistakes do not disqualify you, and your circumstances do not determine your future. The season you've been believing for is closer than you think. The right opportunities, the right relationships, the right breakthroughs, they are already in motion. God has been working behind the scenes, aligning every detail, orchestrating every moment, positioning you for something beyond what you imagined. It may have taken longer than expected, but when the time is right, nothing can stop what's coming your way. Now's the time to release doubt, to let go of fear, to stop looking back and to step forward in faith. Don't settle for less when abundance is ahead. Don't let temporary challenges convince you that you've reached your limit. What's coming is bigger, greater, and more fulfilling than you ever dreamed. Your season of blessings is not just on the way, it's already unfolding. Keep believing, keep expecting, keep standing in faith, because the best is yet to come.